Sim. Muito bem, bom dia a todos. Não sei se é possível depois fechar ali um bocadinho a porta, Rui, desculpa estar a pedir. Vamos dar início, para mantermos o horário a tempo, vamos dar início à nossa primeira conferência plenária. Eu irei tentar fazer o meu melhor no inglês para fazer a apresentação e vamos ter 45 minutos de apresentação do colega e depois algum tempo, 5 minutos para questões, mas obviamente que qualquer um dos conferencistas estará sempre disponível para, durante o dia de hoje e de amanhã, conversar sobre as temáticas que consideram que são próximas daquilo que vocês estão também a fazer. Irei então fazer a apresentação. Welcome all to the second International Congress of Life Quality Research Center. Even though it is the second Congress, it's affirming its scientific dimension. I would like to thank our colleague, Dr. Magni, and of course Susan, his wife, for his presence, for accepting the collaboration with our research center. We'd like to welcome here with a little more of sunshine, but let's hope that this shy sun is enough to make you to come back to Portugal and to work with us in other collaboration. I will now proceed to a brief presentation of his resume. Magni Mohr is a professor in tracking, testing, and training in the University of Southern Denmark and professor in exercise physiology. He is also a chair of the Faraway Board of the Public Health and the Dean of the Faculty of Health Science. He has published more than 150 peer-reviewed scientific articles and has published several books and book chapters. His research interests include health benefits, effect of football and other sports, and physical activity, exercise as medicine, muscle physiology, as well as match analysis, fatigue recovery, training, testing in elite sports. He has worked in the professional football in Italian Serie A, English Premier League, Spanish La Liga, China, and clubs in Scandinavia, as well as for the men's national team of Denmark, Cameroon, and Faroe Island. I think I said all right. He is a FIFA instructor and teaches fitness training in pro-license courses around the world. He is a part of Football is Medicine platform, as you know, we have here in Portugal also, and has collaboration with more than 20 countries. He has won international awards for his research. And in 2018, he won the Research Communication Award of the Faroe Islands, and in 2020, the award of the Best Annual Event, also in collaboration, it's best with Football is Medicine in 2020. So I would like to thank Magni Mohr for being here. Then you have the floor for you and do your magic with us.
Thank you.
The presentation is the potential of team sports for global health promotion and well-being. 45 minutes.
Yes. How do I turn the mic?
I think I have to do it.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you so much for the very nice presentation, Carla. And thank you, Rui, and all of you guys for inviting me. It's fantastic to be here. And I've been many times to Portugal. I have many collaborators in Lisbon and also in Porto. So it's fantastic to come here for the first time to Liera. So I'm going to talk on the potential of team sports for global health promotion. And if we look at the photos behind me, I try to illustrate what I think that we are on many levels on the wrong trajectory in relation to the way we organize our lives. And I'm going to present a little on that. Originally, I'm from the Faroe Islands, and this is a photo that was taken from the airport. This is what you see when you fly out of the Faroes. It's a very nice view. It's a really small country, as most of you know. So over the years, I've been working for the last 25 years on research within these three areas. So muscle, skeletal muscle energetics. So doing lab studies, trying to be mechanistically orientated. And then I've done a lot of work within performance in sports, in elite sports, trying to understand some of the mechanisms that we find in the lab. How do they work in elite sports setting? And then we have moved on over the years, trying to use some of the same methods that we have used when we are investigating elite sports to investigate the effects on football primarily, but also team sports on health promotion. So it has been quite a privilege for me to be able to work within all of these three areas, which I see is quite an advantage to have, because at the same time that you can be mechanistically orientated, you also have the possibility to work within a public health setting. So these are some of the methods that we have been using. So when we use batch analysis for elite sports, we use the same when we investigate, for example, cancer patients when they are playing football. Or we can use blood samples and testing procedures and so on that we use when we test elite athletes. And then we can use the same methods when we're perhaps looking at hypertensive women playing football. So this has been quite an advantage for us to use some of the same methods in health-oriented research. So if we look at some of the challenges that we have, these are numbers from the World Health Organization on causes of death. So these are some of the biggest health issues that we have. So if we look at low-income countries, even the blue bars, this is difficult for you to read, I know, but I'll explain it to you. So we see that the blue bars are deaths caused by non-communicable diseases. So we have ischemic heart disease and we have stroke. If we move on to lower middle income countries, we see that some of the blue bars are better represented in this. We see that chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is coming in, diabetes, type 2 diabetes is entering the top 10 causes of death. And then if we move to upper middle income countries, we see that our health system is fantastic. We can treat all of the infectious diseases more or less, but the problems that we have with lifestyle diseases is increasing. And when we have the richest countries in the world, it's more or less only non-communicable diseases that are the biggest challenges that we have. So we need to be able to tackle some of these issues. This is an old publication from Lancet in 1953. Very simple study where they looked at, these are some researchers in London, where they looked at drivers and conductors. So what is how long do they live? What is the life expectancy? If you are a driver, you are you're driving the bus, you have to keep your eyes on the road. You can't interact with the travelers. You don't have social contact because you need to drive. compared to the conductors that are moving up and down the stairs, they are talking to people, they are interacting, they are being socially active, and we see some of the risk of death that the drivers have a markedly higher risk of death and a markedly higher risk of dying from ischemic heart disease. So some of these things that we see in these numbers are actually quite old knowledge, but we have so far not been able to tackle some of these problems. Here are also some numbers from Stephen Blair's and his group in America. The risk of death in relation to the maximal oxygen uptake, which is an indicator of how well trained you are. And we see that this is where the American publication was in 1960. So this is the 1960s, where we had a really nice curve here. So we see that more or less all the people are on the right side of the line. And this is 40 years later. So this is 40 years of technological advancement, of inactivity that we see here. So we see that a large portion of the American people has entered the danger zone in relation to. So if we look on the global plan, as you know, physical inactivity in adults, this is how it looks. It's worse in some areas of the world. There are some gender specificities and cultural differences, but more or less, if we look, it's 1/3 of adults do not reach the recommendations. And we look at children of today, children aged 13 to 15, you know that only 1 out of 5 is reaching the minimal requirements for physical activity. So we have some huge challenges ahead, and some challenges that we so far have not been able to solve. So this is some of the things that I'm working with, that when we are physically active, when we are running, lifting weights, working in the garden, chasing the bus, playing with the children or whatever, our muscles are producing a lot of substances, and we know that some of these can enter the brain and affect the way we feel about ourselves, well-being, psychological well-being. We know that some of them can increase the health status of the heart, and so on. So this is a really complex system showing, giving an overview of how much physical activity or exercise can contribute to our health status and well-being. So if we look at how does a life look, if we are looking at cross-sectional studies, looking at master athletes, people that have been active their entire lives, compared to the way that most of the people, inhabitants, at least in our part of the world, are living their lives, then we know that we are being born, we live our lives, and we do not need support from the health sector. The normal child, the normal adult, active on a regular basis, more or less. And we see that some of the challenges that we see in young people today, quite early in their lives, and this is the difference that we see when we look at cross-sectional data from across the world. So how do we solve these issues? And when we look at some of the statements that we are receiving from politicians, from decision makers around the world, it's more or less about slowing down the rate of sinking. This is some of the approach that I think most people are, that it appears that people have given up on many levels. It's not possible. We see that depression, anxiety, type 2 diabetes, ischemic heart disease, different types of cancers are exploding around the world. And still we are approaching things from the same angle. So if we keep on doing the same things that we have been doing, it will be difficult to solve these types of challenges. So we need to somehow move the entire curve. It's really difficult if we work down in this small corner here and we try to target this little element and then expect that we should change the world, which I think we should try to do, at least. So I'm going to talk a little about translational research and how we can move from a research project to implementation. So how that we can understand mechanisms, try them out in a human setting, and then move on to practical implementation. So moving from a mechanism to the whole human, to a group of humans, and trying to have some change of procedure. So we have tried to do this with using sports as a training methods. And if we go back only maybe 20 years, if you said, you should play football for your health, people would say, you're crazy. You're crazy because football, this is something for elite athletes. This is Messi and Maradona and Ronaldo and these types of guys. So how can we play a game for health? So we've tried to approach this problem looking quite broadly at the health effects of sports. So we have tested football players and tried to test them against runners, against swimming, against dancing, against strength training, and try to look quite broadly at the effects on the musculoskeletal system, on strength, taking muscle biopsies and looking at changes in the muscle, taking blood samples, testing for cardiorespiratory fitness, doing echocardial scans of the heart, and we try to test people from the age of 6 and up till 80. So we basically cover the entire lifespan in some of these studies. And more or less, this is the methodology that we've used. So we used a quite broad-scaled approach. So we started out doing pilot studies on homeless men, on untrained people, on master football players. Then we moved on to randomized controlled trials, which we are still doing today, covering young men, middle-aged men and women, and elderly. And now we're working a lot with children, and I'll show you some results on that. Then in 1920, we moved to doing randomized controlled trials on health, on patient groups. So these are some of the patient groups that we have covered. We've also done a lot of work recently within psychiatric diseases and so on. So this is basically the model that we've worked within. So we covered a lot of the groups that there are. So if we think about how these things have changed over the years, then in 2006, a review was published in the Scandinavian Journal of Medicine, Science and Sports by the late Bent Salton and Bente Klarlund Petersen, some of the most talented researchers in the world within this field ever, stating that physical activity is a cornerstone in prevention and treatment. So this is the first time that you use the word treatment in relation to physical activity and in relation to training of lifestyle diseases such as cardiovascular diseases and type 2 diabetes. Later, a few years after, the editor of British Journals of Sports Medicine stated that exercise is medicine for the first time, and physicians need to prescribe it, which is quite an aggressive, at that time, statement. Then Karim Khan, at that time, the editor of Lancet, stated that sports seems to contribute to the health of nations. To the health of nations. So sports, which we competitors, which we always relate to the competitive side, seems to contribute to the health of nations, which is a quite strong statement. And then recently, a lot of meta-analysis data have come out showing that the evidence was found that football and running was the most gave the most beneficial improvement for cardiovascular and metabolic benefits. So this is just to show you that you move in 2006 from stating that exercise is a way to treat diseases to stating that football, a game played by children, by athletes, can be used to challenge some of these global challenges that we have. So I'll show you some examples, and I'll start out with some children models that we have developed. This is some collaborations that we did with FIFA many years ago, where we had developed the 11 for Health sports concept, and we tried it out in Africa and South America. So we have 10 health messages which are relevant for this region of the world, which is, for example, respect girls and women, protect yourself from HIV, avoid alcohol and so on, drink purified water, and take your prescribed medication, which is also a challenge in this region. And then we had some representatives, some famous football players that are representatives for these health messages. So this is health education on the football field for children. Then we made a European version of this, where we have respect others, and all of these health messages are linked to a football activity. So if I'm passing a ball to Carla, and I pass it really nicely, you can take it, you can control it. But if I pass it very hard, it's very difficult for you to work with it. And this is the same the way we communicate. So when we teach children that when you pass the ball, pass it easily, with the right pace, the right direction. And at the same time, when we communicate, if I say something to one of you, I need to talk in the right way, with the right voice. So this is how we link some of these football activities to health messages. So dribbling, you need to dribble when you play football or handball or basketball. But in life, you also need to dribble around challenges such as cigarettes, alcohol, tobacco, and so on. So this is the way we try to teach the children these things. This is how it looks. You have to read the subtitles.
På fodboldbanen, hvor børnene de har det sjovt, får god træning og lærer en hel masse. Både de, der er vant til at spille fodbold, og de, som ikke spiller fodbold i en fodboldklub. Meget fint. Flot samarbejde. Den europæiske version af FIFA 11, som jeg har været med til at udvikle sammen med FIFAs forskningsenhed FMARK og DBU, ja, den har faktisk vist sig både at have effekter på børnenes fysiske form, deres blodtryk og fedtprocent, men også deres sociale trivsel og deres sundhedsviden om fysisk aktivitet, om kost, om hygiejne og så det at samarbejde og tænke positivt.
Forløbet er jo bygget sådan op, at det er et 11-ugers projekt. I de 11 uger, der er der en manual for, hvad er det for nogle ting, vi skal arbejde med.
This is a teacher who's working with the
manual. Sundhedsbudskab, som vi snakker med dem om. Vi skal til at snakke om vand. Er nogen, der ved, hvorfor det er rigtig godt at drikke vand? Oliver?
Altså, for eksempel, vand det er sådan bedre, og for eksempel, hvis man nu drak sodavand, der var der rigtig meget sukker i stedet for, hvis man drak vand.
Det unikke ved projektet det er, at vi underviser børnene i 10 sundhedsbudskaber, som handler om fysisk aktivitet med høj intensitet, som handler om sund og varieret kost, som handler om hygiejne.
So I'll move on from that, but this is the way it's been delivered. So we teach the teachers, we train the trainers, and they deliver it in the school settings. So it's twice a week. In first week they have, and they train a little, they get homework. They have to train with their grandmother, some passing drills, or their friends, or their grandmother, some passing drills, or their friends, or whatever. And then when they come back, we have focus on the health message. So we still keep them active, we still play, but then we have focus on the health messages. And we see effects on blood pressure, even if children have normally at that age, 10 to 12 years, children have okay blood pressures. We see a decline in blood pressures, meaning that we're working on some of the mechanisms that are fighting hypertension. We see that we can improve their body composition, lowering fat percentage, increasing muscle mass. And then we also test for health knowledge. So we test them on a questionnaire on how much they have learned about health. And we see that primarily in being physically active, we see effects, keeping fit, think positively, and so on. We see significant effects of this intervention compared to a control group. So we also test these children for cognition and see some effects on attention and psychomotor function. So we are also able to improve cognitive function within this framework. This is something that we've implemented quite dramatically in Denmark, on the Faroe Islands, in China, in the States, and so on. We're working on other countries now. Iceland is another country that will start to use some of these models. We also test for well-being, showing effects on physical well-being when we look from a cross-sectional area. These are children that are physically active within different sports, the most popular sports. These are boys. We see marked effects on well-being on boys that are physically active in sports. Same when we look at children, girls, in the same age group, we see that the 5 most popular sports for women, being football, team handball, gymnastics, swimming, and dance, marked effect on physical well-being. And the same we see when we test these models. When we do randomized controlled trials, cluster randomized controlled trials, having control schools and having intervention schools that we compare. This is a study with 3,000 Danish school children, so it has really strong statistical power. We see marked effect on health knowledge with these groups, and we see marked effect on physical well-being, quality of life, social skills, and also the physical effects that I showed you before. Yesterday, this paper was published where we implemented it in the Faroe Islands, and in this study we focused on well-being and on health knowledge, and just to show you that it also worked within a small community such as the Faroes. So just to show you that irrespective of culture, we can target kids at different levels. We also tested the popularity, looking at boys compared to girls. We don't see any gender effects, which would be expected because football normally is a game for boys. So we are also able to target the girls to a high degree in popularity. And also recently we did a study where we looked at ethnic minorities in Denmark, so people with another ethnical background. We also see effects on ethnical minority children that are physically inactive in their leisure time. So we have developed a model because we have been able to first do a few randomized controlled trials, then we change the model, and when we have large-scale evidence, we do the manuals, we do the courses, and we implement it. And this has been implemented in large parts of Scandinavia so far. We also have developed this model called Fit First, which is frequent, intense training in schools to try to increase the quality of the PE sessions. So this is being delivered 3 times per week. And we made one model called Fit First 10 that has been made for children aged 6 to 9. Then we have Fit First 20 and 10 and 20, which is for 10 to 12 years old. And 10 and 20 means that we are taking intense and strength-based elements from 10 and 20 different sports. And this is primarily ball games and racket games and martial arts. We also developed a model called Fit First Teen, so we have covered the entire school system. And we see effects. This is just a few results on aerobic fitness, on cardiac structure and function. This is based on echocardio scans, and also on bone mineralization. So to conclude this first part, evidence-based sports concepts that can be delivered in the school settings, because in the school we have control over the children. All children have to go to school. So this is a setting where we have them, where we really can make an impact on some of the challenges that I started out saying, that how do we solve the unsolvable? Because we're really on the wrong trajectory. We have tried so many things and we still see a high increase in type 2 diabetes, in depression, and so on. And we have these models that are ready to be implemented, and we see not only physical effects, but also effect on mental and social health status and well-being. And we see that these effects are independent on sex, social and cultural background, sports experience, so we're also targeting the children that are difficult to target, and ethnicity, ethnical background. And the concepts are perceived as popular, and this is why we think that they have a high sustainability. And the reason that we're using football, even if we're also working on other sports, is because of the power, the commercialized value of football. It's maybe the most powerful brand in the world. So instead of having the focus on the World Cup in Qatar or the World Cup we have the focus at that because it's a popular sport, we can use it to sell some of these health messages that we have. What's the time? Yes. And plenty of time. Good. You're good? Okay. Shall we continue? Yes. So we developed this model called football is medicine, which is also very provocative. Football is medicine. How can football be a medicine? It can. It can work like a medicine if you define it as a medicine. But we have this model where we have the prevention part here, we have the treatment part here, and we have the rehabilitation. So this is the physical part, more or less. And we see that football is an all-in-one training, because if you have elderly people playing football, if you have children, middle-aged people, people that are struggling, obesity, and so on, we see by measuring what goes on from a physical point of view that they are doing endurance training, they are doing high-intensity interval training, and they are doing strength training in the same session. And this means that we can have a broad spectrum effect on metabolic fitness, on cardiovascular fitness, and on musculoskeletal fitness. And this means that we can reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, osteoporosis, and the risk of falls and fractures. But at the same time, the lower part here is that it's not only healthy, it's also fun. It's also social. So we move from I and they and we stories to more positive and intrinsic motivation. So this is why we believe that this type of using sports, such as football, it could be any team sports that has a strong social factor, can be used to challenge some of these challenges. This is more or less, we're doing endurance training, HIIT training, and strength training, and we have published 200 papers on this, but I'll show you some of these. This is one of the early studies that we made, where we compared the effect of jogging, interval running, football training, strength training, and control. So these are training models where we, for example, when they jog, we have matched the training volume. We have matched the training volume compared to football. We see that football has a high impact on the maximal oxygen uptake compared to interval running. It also has a high effect on lean body mass, on hypertrophy, compared to strength training. And it has a high effect on reducing body fat content compared to endurance running. And it has a huge effect on bone health, which is also compared to strength training. So it's like an all-in-one training. You do team sports training, this could also be basketball or something else, and you get the benefits of all these three domains. We have our group have published 3 meta-analyses on the impact of football training. This is one of them, looking at the change in maximal oxygen uptake, where we see an 11% increase. And this is a strong clinical implication on reducing mortality for these types of groups. Several of these groups are patient groups that are included in these studies. Also looking at the effect of blood pressure, we see strong meta-analysis level evidence for patients with mild to moderate hypertension, age 30 to 75. And these changes here are basically comparable to what you can achieve with pharmacological treatment. And recently we published this in Sports Medicine on the effect, it's a systematic review and meta-analysis on bone health, showing that football is also an osteogenic type of training. So we have a huge effect on bone mineral density, and especially when we look at clinically important sites, such as the upper part of the femur and the lower spine. So before we round it up, I can show you just some examples of the studies that we've done on patients. So this is a study where we had hypertensive patients where we tested football training together with doctoral advice against doctoral advice alone. So this is what the Danish health sector is providing to people. And we see that getting advice from the doctor has some effect, but when you combine it with training, such as football training, you have a markedly higher reduction in systolic blood pressure and in diastolic blood pressure. And beside these effects, if we look at overall effects, we see that you also reduce arterial stiffness, you also reduce resting heart rate, you increase the maximal oxygen uptake, and you reduce obesity. So using exercise training or using football as a treatment, you do not only treat the hypertensive part, you also work multi-faceted in relation to all risk factors. This is another study where we combined postural balance of 30-year-old untrained men compared to 70-year-olds football players, compared to a control group of 70-year-old untrained men. So we see that postural balance of men that have been actively, regularly participating in football training twice a week during their entire lives, they have a balance that is comparable to 30-year-old untrained men, and they are obviously much better than their age-matched counterparts. Same time, when we look for RFD, or rapid muscle force, rate of force development, we see that they are just as strong as well. So you can basically, by participating regularly in this sport, you can counteract 40 years of aging within muscle strength. We also have developed models for men with prostate cancer, which is a huge problem. Obviously, they are called FC prostate. Not FC Barcelona, but FC prostate. But these are some of these men, and these are men that are being treated with testosterone blockers, so they're getting androgen deprivation therapy against prostate cancer, which has huge impact on their mental health as well. And but it also has changes in muscle strength. You see that there's a tendency that many of them have a reduction in strength here, while the group that is training football while they are receiving the therapy, the medical therapy, they maintain and they even increase their strength, and they also counteract the effects that are on bone health, because getting the testosterone blocked has huge negative impact on your bone health. So in many of these studies that we've done, we've also tested for mental well-being, for the psychological effect, working with a group of psychologists. So when we were setting up these types of large-scale randomized controlled trials, and you're looking at maybe the medical or the clinical and the physical part, you also can work together with other disciplines, so that we also can look at on the well-being and quality of life effects. And we see, looking at large trials, community-delivered football training for prostate cancer patients, we see large effect on mental health and large effect on mental well-being. Same, we have developed a model called ABC for women that are being treated for breast cancer, so after breast cancer. Large effects on maximal oxygen uptake, but also large effect on physical well-being. So why is football or team handball or team sports such an effective way? Firstly, it provides high heart rates, and here we have patient groups and frail groups such as untrained elderly playing football, and we see type 2 diabetes and prostate cancer patients. So even if we look at these really frail groups, we see that their heart rate responds to this type of training, small-sided games, 5 versus 5, 3 versus 3, 6 versus 6, the heart rate is very high, and this is not possible for this group to attain this amount of stimulation of the cardiovascular system if you make them run or cycle. So this is a really efficient way to train the cardiovascular system, Also, when we do match analysis of these groups, we see that they sprint, they dribble, they turn, they tackle. So all of these football-specific elements are driving up the changes in, for example, in bone health. And we also see correlationships between changes in bone mineral content and the number of decelerations. So this is maybe the strength stimulus of the sport. And then there is a high anaerobic energy turnover. You activate all your muscle fiber types, which is really important if we are dealing with the metabolic fitness. So this is just evidence showing the effect of these training modalities. So recreational football and team sports are an all-in-one training model, or hybrid training, as we call it. And it means that it improves cardiovascular, metabolic, and musculoskeletal health. And we see at meta-analysis level that we can use this for prevention and for treatment for various non-communicable diseases. But at the same time, we see that we upregulate well-being and quality of life, and the patients, the elderly, the middle-aged, the women, the men, the children, they perceive this to be enjoyable, to be fun, and to be social. And this is across the lifespan, showing that this may be a model that is sustainable over time. And this is what we see also when we start large-scale randomized controlled trials. We see that when the trial is over, they say, no, it's not over. We want to continue to play. And in the Faroe Islands, some years ago, we started out a group of women playing, the hypertensive women, middle-aged women, and recently we did a 9-year follow-up. They made their own football club. They organized themselves, and they're playing still 9 years later, without any impact, without any stimulation, without any support or help. So we have many of these examples. Also in Portugal, in Lisbon, we have some example of that. In Brazil, in Atlanta, in the US, showing that there may be some global potential in these. We have written some special issues. Here are some of them, having focus on the prevention part, on the treatment, and on the implementation part of this research. And this is from a translational point of view. This is the way we've been working since 2003, doing the pilot studies, moving to randomized controlled trial, moving to patients, to children, to international studies, to large-scale implementation studies. And at the same time, we've given out, or we published the special issues, we published books, we made an international platform called Football is Medicine, and we have made all of these sports concepts, and I have developed coaching courses. So we're moving from when we have enough evidence, when we have meta-analysis level evidence, we make the models, we make the sports concepts, and we make the courses so that we can deliver it to the community, to the world, actually. Here are some of the football fitness, which is the basic course, football for the heart, which is made specifically for cardiovascular patients, SC prostate, and for elderly. This is a model for people with for cancer. This is implemented in the Danish health sector, so that the general practitioners are sending people or giving men that are in treatment for prostate cancer the opportunity to take part in football training. Football for socially derived people is a new model that we made, and then we have the different children models as well. This is some of the places that we're running studies, also here in Portugal, as you can see. And we had, in 2018 in Lisbon, we had the first Football is Medicine conference. Then we have been in Denmark, in the Faroes. We should have been in Liverpool in 2001, but this was cancelled. And last year we were in Doha, Qatar, where we co-hosted the conference with the World Health Organization. And from the 7th to the 9th of June, we'll go to Atlanta in the States. In 2024, it will be in Firenze in Italy. So this has really developed also into an international platform with a lot of people taking part. So Football is Medicine. It's time for pupils to play, for people to play, and for patients to play. This is a book that we published some couple of years ago about some of these models as well. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. I will now pass to you for some questions. I don't know if someone can take. Okay, thank you. Welcome, Rafael. Welcome, Rafael.
Can I stand?
Yeah, of course.
Hello again. So my question is very simple, is regarding the women, older women especially. So our Portuguese population is getting older and older, and it's difficult to engage older women in physical activity in general. So do you have any strategies on how to engage older women to football?
I think this may be challenging. This may be more challenging in some regions. I think this may be challenging. This may be more challenging in some regions of the world than in others, because it also depends on if you think about women that are, what is an older woman? Maybe I should be careful. Let's just say elderly women. But if we want to target this group, we have to think about maybe women that have been growing up being very far away from the perception that they should ever be football players. This has changed dramatically in Scandinavia, and this may also be related to, I think, a quite high gender equality that we have in the Scandinavian countries. So maybe it's easier at this time point to target women, but for example, in the Faroes and in Denmark, we have advertised with municipalities, for example, together with football clubs, that now we want to start this up for women, and also because we have been very aggressive in communication about our results. I think this has people have been they are used to hearing that elderly people are playing football and it's good for their health and well-being. So I think it's a process, but getting the clubs involved and getting the community involved, the municipalities. If you can, maybe you can go out to, I don't know if in Portugal if women have a forum where they meet in that age group. That could be something. I think that's the way to do it. But to be very clear on selling this message as a possibility, because for example, I'll tell you a story. I was in Greece 5 years ago, and now 5 years, 10 years ago, and I was showing some of these results.